In the haunted swamps of Louisiana, two Yankee tourists from New York want to be damn sure they see some alligators on their swamp boat tour. When they discover a secret village of primitive Cajun people in a hidden swamp cove, they learn that the swamp dwellers share an ancient faith with the alligators, a faith that beckons the two tourists to give their hearts and souls to God.
"What the hell was that grunting?" asked Maury. The Cajun swamp boat tour guide answered, "You mean that bullfrog? That's what y'all hearing. And when it sounds deeper and louder, that's alligators." "Alligators! We want to see alligators." It was Maury's business partner, Sam. "Y'all gonna see some? Don't worry. I won't let y'all come all the way down from New York City and not see some alligators." The Louisiana swamp stood glass still, the muddy, stagnant water hiding its secrets among the green algae and cypress trees with their rooted knees poking just above the water. Lily pads formed a patchwork carpet in their masses, and from the branches high above the brown water's surface, gray Spanish moss hung down like fingers beckoning entry. Blue herons and white egrets stood on one leg, eyeing the suspicious intruders, while frogs and turtles sat on logs in the brilliant sunlight. The small swamp boat's little wake was the only thing that broke the water's perfect stillness. "We'd better see some alligators," Maury bristled. "We paid good money for this." The guide, unruffled, just smiled and winked and said, "I promise y'all gonna see some alligators." Ignoring the guide, the two Yankees looked out over the swampy landscape. Even such hardened and bitter lawyers from New York seemed as charmed as schoolboys by the alien environment, so different from the concrete and asphalt hellscape where they lived. "Have y'all had some of our famous boiled crawfish and gumbo on this trip?" the guide prompted. Thoughts of Cajun food snapped the lawyers out of their meanness for a spell. After all, the best and worst of men still enjoyed eating. "Oh yeah," Sam answered. "That's good stuff. Yep, real good. Those crawfish are awfully spicy, though. I don't like spicy food." From a small clump of cypress-covered grassy land about 50 feet from the boat, a bullfrog grunted. The two tourists turned to look. Maury held up his iPhone and snapped a picture just as two turtles crawled off a log and plopped into the water. "Damn it, I thought it was an alligator." Sam was back in his New York mood. A deep, baritone bellow echoed across the swamp like a growl and a grunt together, but resounding in some great acoustic chamber so that it rattled the chest. "Oh, geez! What kind of bullfrog was that?" Maury asked nervously. "Oh, that wasn't no bullfrog," the guide answered. "Y'all just heard an alligator bellowing. Look, y'all see that little grove of cypress trees over there?" The guide pointed. "That opens to a cove that we call Alligator Cove. Y'all gonna see lots of gators, so get those cameras ready if you want." "Alligators?" piped the two tourists in unison. They gripped their iPhones and pointed them ahead as the boat chugged towards the cove. They passed the cypress tress that kept the cove's entrance like some sort of guardian spirits judging who might be deemed worthy to enter. The trunks and branches, bearded with thick Spanish moss, glared down as the boat slowly drifted through them and into the cove proper. The guide pulled the throttle back to almost nothing, then cut the engines as the boat inched into the cove and towards the little patch of grassy swampland that served as the excuse for a small island. "Now," whispered the guide, "y'all be real quiet and don't scare them away. Look there, just in front of the boat. There's a bunch of gators out sunning." The two Yankee tourists craned their necks and looked. Sam whispered, "Look! Alligators!" The sleek brown bodies of the prehistoric holdovers from the dinosaur age peppered the little clump of land. Most were about 5 feet long, with the occasional 10-foot monster lounging among its lesser peers. The New Yorkers snapped picture after picture, bewitched by such raw nature in full display right in front of them. For all the glory of their city, their Manhattan and their Brooklyn and their towering architectural tributes to the human spirit, something about the encounter with the ancient beasts stunned them. There lay the cold, mindless devourers of life, the only protection between them and the civilized humans being the thin metal hull of the swamp boat. "Wow," whispered Maury religiously. They're just right there, alligators. Y'all want to feed them? The guide pulled out a bag of large marshmallows. The two tourists looked at each other. Suddenly, in the face of the wild, toothy animals, their Yankee bravado seemed missing. "Feed them?" repeated Sam in a hushed voice. "Gee, is that a good idea? Is it safe?" A sparkle of satisfaction flashed in the guide's eyes. "Perfectly safe. Watch." The guide called out something in Cajun French. The alligators obviously associated his voice with food, for a dozen or so of them crawled to the edge of the little island, then slipped into the water. They lazily flipped their tails back and forth and glided to the sides of the boat. The guide tossed a few marshmallows to them. The creatures opened their maws to the sweet treats, then snapped them down, gluttonously eating up the marshmallows. "They're not beasts," the guide said. "Look at them. Aren't they beautiful? Such ancient wisdom, such understanding of the ways of nature." Maury was brave. He took a marshmallow and tossed it at one of the alligators, who snapped it up. Sam followed suit. The two stared, mesmerized at the connection with something so old and so wild. The guide let the boat float there silently for several minutes. Sam and Maury stared into the alligator's bulbous eyes with their vertical pupil slits, and the animals stared back. When the guide started the engines again, it broke the trance. He steered out of the cove. "Gee, that was something," Maury said. "Alligators." "We saw alligators," Sam repeated. The boat made its way across an expanse of brown water towards another little copse of cypress trees. "Now, I'm going to show y'all something that not many people get to see. You know people live out in these swamps, yeah? There's a little community just up there, just a tiny fishing village on piers with a little church. Since y'all from out of town, I'm going to show you. But remember that these are real people living real lives. We like to keep quiet about it for the most part, so no one disturbs them." Sam and Maury looked at each other with raised eyebrows. "Primitive Cajuns living in the swamp, Sam," Maury said in his whiny, nasal voice. "Yeah, I want to see some primitive Cajuns. I want some pictures to show our friends back in New York that swamp people still live like that. They'll never believe us." The guide allowed a small half-smirk across his lips, but only for a fleeting moment. Without a word, he sailed the little metal boat across the open space into the copse of cypress. Passing through it, they found themselves in the middle of a large, hidden cove. Little spots of land here and there were absolutely covered with alligators, and around the outside of the cove floated houseboats and stood little wooden houses on piers. On a small island in the center of the cove, a small church beckoned the visitors. Constructed simply of whitewashed wood, the church looked about large enough to hold the few villagers. A square steeple rose 10 feet into the sky. "Wow, look how primitive," Maury marveled. "Real swamp people. Kinda hard to believe we live in the same country as people like this, hey Sam?" "Yeah, this is crazy. Swamp people. Hey, you, guide. What about all those alligators? How do the swamp people live with them like that? Isn't it dangerous?" The guide slid the boat onto the shallow shore of the church island. "Not when you're used to it," he answered. At once, the hundreds of alligators started to bellow. Countless reptile voices roared as one, so loud that the two city slickers had to cover their ears. They looked frightened. The bellowing died down. "They're excited to see visitors," the guide explained. "Just think of it as a welcome call. Come on, y'all come see inside the church. You can take some great pictures. Just think of how amazed your friends in New York will be." "Pictures?" Maury asked. Yeah, pictures. That sounds good." "Why aren't there any alligators on the church island?" Sam asked as the guide helped them out of the boat onto the muddy, grassy land. "Even the animals respect God," the guide answered with a strange smile. "Come on inside." He opened the small church's door and led the tourists inside. At first, it seemed like a standard Catholic church. A few pews flanked an aisle, enough seating for the people in the village, but not many more. In the front stood an altar covered with a dark green cloth. Maury and Sam looked at the stained glass windows on the side walls. The crude artwork displayed saints praying in the swamp. Every stained glass scene was filled with alligators. Why are there alligators in the stained glass? Aren't they supposed to show Jesus or something? The guide did not reply. Instead, he made the sign of the cross and mouthed a quick, silent prayer towards the front of the church. Maury and Sam looked at the altar. "Something seems off," Maury said. Sam stared with large eyes at something in front. Look at the crucifix," he whispered. There was no dying Jesus on this cross. Instead, the wooden effigy of an alligator hung crucified. Its long mouth was open and lined with razor teeth, and its round reptilian eyes seemed to watch the visitors. From behind them came the click of the church door opening. Sam and Maury wheeled around to see the villagers entering. Men dressed in waiter hip boots and flannel shirts and baseball caps accompanied women in simple dresses and aprons and bonnets. The people's faces were leathered and tanned from daily exposure to the cruel Louisiana sun. "What's going on?" Maury asked. "Are they the swamp people?" With greedy eyes, the villagers slowly crowded Maury and Sam and surrounded them. "What's this? What's happening? Take us back to the landing," Sam said to the guide, but the guide only smiled and remained silent. Behind the altar, a priest appeared from somewhere in the back. He wore priestly garments of forest green. He turned, knelt, and said a prayer to the cross. Turning back around, he asked, "Are these the offerings?" "Yes, Father," answered the guide. "Offering." "What? What the hell are you talking about?" Maury demanded, but the villagers only grabbed him and Sam's arms and forced them towards the altar. They thrashed and tried to escape, but their New York lawyer strength was no match for the weathered villagers who spent every day in the swamp. The priest led a prayer in Cajun French as the people bowed to the crucified alligator statue. "God awaits his due sacrifice," the priest said. "Bring them outside." The villagers manhandled Sam and Maury back out of the church. The two tourists tried again to wrestle free, but they were soon exhausted. The people led them to the edge of the church island. Across the cove, the countless alligators slid into the water. "Oh my God! Are you feeding us to the alligators? You're insane! You can't get away with this! We're lawyers!" "We're not feeding you to the alligators," the priest replied in a calm voice. "We're offering you to God." From the thick trees across the cove, a great profound bellow rang out. Its vibrations were so deep and loud that Sam and Maury were physically shaken. Then, the ground began to vibrate in rhythm, the unmistakable rhythm of footsteps, of the enormous footsteps of some horrible, dreadful beast approaching them. The cypress trees split apart, their hard, curable wood torn into splinters as something passed through them. From the trees emerged something so terrible that Maury and Sam shook and fell to their knees. An alligator, a monster taller than the cypress trees, wider than the island, and longer than a train, burst out of the wilderness. Maury and Sam could only look up at the alligator god, some elder thing from long before Jesus and long before even humanity had appeared in the world. It opened its snout and bellowed again. The sound waves blew across Sam's and Maury's hair and ruffled it. The sour, acrid odor of rotting meat from its mouth filled the cove. "Praise God!" shouted the priest between the great bellows. "We worship you and offer these sacrifices. Please watch over our village, and may our fishing nets always remain full." The ancient alligator god crawled across the village in only a few steps and stood just in front of Maury and Sam. They quivered and melted with dread, both unable to speak or move. The villagers were all bowed in worshipful reverence. The god opened its jaws. Each pointed tooth was taller than a man. With one motion, it snatched and tore apart both tourists at once and swallowed them down into its corrosive belly. The god looked down upon its worshippers, its little congregation of faithful devotees to the ancient way of the swamp. Satisfied, it turned and crawled back into the darkness of the cypress trees. "The harvest sacrifice is done," said the priest. "He is pleased. We will have full nets for yet another season. Now go back to your houses and give thanks." The crowd of villagers slowly dissipated, each couple either walking back to their house on piers or padding their shallow pirogues back to their houseboats. As they passed the alligators sunning themselves on logs and land, the creatures parted, still in awe of the presence of their Creator and in obeisance to the servants of the god. The tour guide piloted his metal boat out of the little village cove and back to the landing where he picked up passengers. The waters rested still and smooth, hiding their secrets. The turtles and frogs and carp went about their aquatic lives, and in the distance, the bellow of an alligator rang out across the swamp.
Watch this video next up on the Scare Me Now channel. Go ahead, click it on, if you dare.